So thank you all, first of all, for making the time to come join us on this. My name's Harvey. I'm one of our software engineers at Isansys. My work at the moment is primarily focused on the development of a new line of ECG heart rate sensors for monitoring neonatal babies. But for today, I will be acting as your host, your compère for this webinar. So we're going to be discussing the many varied challenges that the healthcare sector is facing, including on all those challenges, the impact that the pandemic has had, of course, and how we might hopefully be able to alleviate those issues, possibly with the use of technology. I'll be asking questions as we go, and I'll give each of you a chance to respond and to talk a little bit, but this is by no means a very formal conference or presentation. So hopefully we can have some informal discussion. And if someone does say something very interesting, feel free to politely perhaps jump in and yeah, we can have a really interesting talk, I hope. So first of all, I've introduced myself. Perhaps we should go around and let each of you introduce yourselves. Mandie, do you want to start?
Oh, thanks for putting me on the spot. Yeah, no problem at all. Hello, my name is Mandie Holgate. I'm a global coach, author and speaker. Through the pandemic, I've worked with quite a few public sector teams. I'm also here because my husband decided to show off in truly spectacular style. He's never been ill in his entire life. And then in November 2020, he had a blood clot, a stroke, a partial lung collapse. They then discovered only 15 to 22% of his heart was working. In a 3-minute phone call, I was told that he wasn't a candidate for surgery and there was nothing that could be done. I decided I wouldn't accept that, moved him to another hospital where they also found he had thyroid cancer. So last year we had about 250 appointments, surgeries, procedures. Obviously he was unable to work, so I was working full-time, and I specialise in resilience, productivity and supporting large teams, but I also support small businesses and innovators as well. So that's me, Mandie Holgate.
Busy year for you then.
Oh yeah, I even wrote a book while we were going through all that. I don't know how I managed. Oh, I forgot to mention, I also have lupus, Raynaud's, Sjogren's and fibromyalgia, but I've never missed a day off work. I like to be busy.
And what is the name of your book?
The first one was Fight the Fear. It looks at the 12 biggest fears that impact on us in our professional lives. Many of those are mega relevant in the pandemic and how we see our NHS struggling. And the second one is called Taking Control of Your Mind, How to Be Resilient and Get Through Tough Times and Be Confident and Happy.
Which I think we all need to understand better, especially nowadays.
Yes.
Oh, great. Well, thank you very much. Carol, would you like to go next?
I can, but I don't know how I can follow that. But,
tough act to follow.
Yeah, so my name's Carol Rowlands. I'm currently Head of Nursing and Complex Care for the Community and Mental Health Division of Alder Children's Community Trust here in Liverpool. Really, my involvement with Isansys is that we're actually undertaking a pilot at the moment, looking at remote monitoring and how actually we can support to keep children and young people out of hospital. So that's just one of the areas we're looking at in the transformation at the moment of the care that we give to our children and young people.
Yeah, I'm sure keeping people out of hospital is probably going to be a key topic that we'll be discussing a lot on this webinar.
Yeah. No, that's one of our main aims, yes.
Fantastic. Claire.
Hi, good morning. My name is Claire Goodwin-Fee. I am the founder and CEO of Frontline 19. We provide a free confidential counselling service and support service to NHS and frontline workers. I'm a psychotherapist by trade and wanted to help or do my part during the pandemic to support the NHS, and decided that I'd try and do a small project to connect workers with qualified professionals so they could have some extra support. And the reason I wanted to do that is because the NHS saved my dad's life back in 2018 when he was very ill and in intensive care. The staff there were amazing. They worked incredibly hard and kind of went the extra mile. So I kind of just kept thinking about the people that would be hit the hardest during the pandemic, and kept thinking back to these people that had helped my dad. And so started what I thought was going to be a very small project, maybe matching 40 or maybe 50 people. And so far, I think we're just shy of about 10,000 people that we've helped over the last 2 years. We've given in excess of, I think it's around about 160,000 counselling sessions to people, plus group work, debriefing sessions. We've had conversations with all sorts of people across government and the NHS, different areas, to try and kind of not only help people right now, but to look proactively to the future to see what can be changed going forward, to build in, as Mandie said, resilience, and to kind of look at the aspect of mental health within the helping professions, which is still quite underdeveloped, I would say. So yeah, really busy, but I love the work that I do. I'm passionate about mental health, and I think that all of us have kind of probably had our own challenges over the last 2 years in some way, shape or form. So it's nice to spend some time today talking about, you know, how perhaps things in the future can adapt and change to support more people.
That's great. Yeah, thank you very much, Claire. And Keith.
Yeah, so good morning. I'm Keith Errey. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Isansys. And my background is technology, so I feel a little bit kind of awed actually in the present company, and to a large extent have done so since I started working with clinical folks, which is now many years ago. I guess where I started on this journey was working with a professor from Imperial College, and we were making very early versions of mobile telephones back in the 1990s. And we recognized that, everything was going wireless. And so we developed some wireless technology to connect patients to a cloud. And we're talking 2002, 2005, like a long time ago in technology terms. And it was recognized as being a great idea, and we had technology to do it. But really, it was never really adopted. And we recognized that there were many, many other people who were trying to do something very similar. And I guess out of that came the realization that what we're looking at here isn't really a technology challenge. And I think, you as professionals in this area, and Mandie, particularly the work that you do, this is really about how people interact with other people, enabled through various technologies. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to provide a kind of enabling technology, and Carol is some of the people who are using it at the moment. But we see that this is, about all we can do as technologists to try to address some of the things that we will talk about later in this session, which is the real challenges that are faced generally by, the healthcare provider community, and also, particularly now as hopefully we've come out of the worst of the pandemic.
Keith, you were just talking about your perspective as coming from a technology company, trying to solve some of these challenges. So what is it that you think are the biggest challenges right now?
It really comes down to the fact that healthcare is a people-to-people business. And no matter how much technology we talk about, and we talk about people doing a lot more self-care and consumer healthcare and so on, but when you're sick and you need assistance, you need a person to provide that assistance. And the healthcare community has been working on ways of being able to provide that assistance and learning how to do that, and in a very real sense, keep people alive. And the way they do that works. And to start to consider even small changes in that can be quite difficult. And also, the too much technology has been thrown at healthcare providers and nurses and doctors now for many years, without recognizing that really, it is about a people-to-people business, and it's about enabling people to do something better, not sit down and be told what to do on computers. And that, Carol, you would have been around in the national program for IT days, that kind of thing, where loads of computers were delivered to all the hospitals and doctors and nurses, and you had bright young things from the big global consultancy firms come in and tell these people what they had to do their jobs. And there was a crazy scenario, and of course failed. And so I think we as technologists, as I say, I think all we can do and is to be as humble as possible, listen to what people want to do with the technology, try to respond to that, and provide systems and services that can help, because fundamentally that's all we can do.
Yeah, and I mean, I'd echo that really. If you think about what the NHS has been through in the last couple of years, change itself is tiring, but we've got to change. We've got to, it's the transformation, it's got to happen, and it is happening. But as part of the NHS 5-year plan, wasn't it? It was about to introduce technology, to introduce the team working, this digital attendance, and actually there were plans in place. We did that virtually overnight in the end, because here we all are sitting on our computers at different parts of the country, and that's the way we talk to other members of, well, I certainly talk to other members of my team via technology every day now. So we've made a huge progress, and that is down to COVID. Yeah.
So if technology should remain humble, like you said, Keith, and be seen as the tool used to solve some of these challenges rather than being the solution in and of itself. Carol, from your perspective, so what are the challenges that we should possibly use technology to solve? But in general, what are the largest challenges that you're seeing in the healthcare sector?
I suppose if I give the example of the challenges of, keeping children and young people where they should be, at home, and that's why we're looking at remote monitoring tools at the moment. So but it's using these tools to enhance and make our care effective, but it's actually, we can't take the human element away as well. So this is where we've got to work hand in hand with it. So that in itself is a challenge, introducing new things, but and it's also different for our clients, our patients, because when they're ill, the go-to place at the moment is going into hospital. And what we're saying is that we can provide that care just as well out of hospital. So it's what can we do to provide that assurance and reassurance as well that we can do that. So lots of different facets to it, really. It's just not introducing a piece of equipment, is it?
If I may add to what Carol's saying there and reinforcing what Keith is saying, in my experience, I come to this conversation in two formats. Firstly, as a carer for my husband, who was very, very seriously ill, and we did nearly lose him about 5 times in the last year. Very really nearly lost him. But I also come to this conversation in the sense that I sit with teams in environments like this, and we have very honest, non-judgmental conversations where we understand their point of view. And I think what is often missing is that there isn't this open dialogue that allows every single person to come forward and say, this is my view on it. I often hear things said, oh, they've given us more tech, or we've got to do this now, and we've got to do that. And they're not, and if there had been a non-judgmental conversation about what do you want. I remember before the pandemic, I was on a stage for a large team in the care industry. So very closely linked to the NHS and with the similar levels of delicate little goals and things, and it's all so easy and your budgets are slashed all the time. And I can remember a person saying to me, I said to these people, what do you want? Now, obviously the leadership team has said there is no more money, so don't talk about money. And I knew that they'd want to talk about money, so we did. And someone shouted out, we want more money. And I said, well, how much? And they said, as much as those footballers. And to cut a long story short, what they were saying is they wanted to be acknowledged. They wanted to be respected. They wanted someone to, at the front, the leadership team, to listen. Instead of you giving us this kit and telling us we have to do this now, and now we have to get these reports in, you come and sit with us. And I think that's why coaching is so powerful. I do non-judgmental coaching. So nobody is off limits to say anything. And at the start, everyone's very quiet. And it's like, I know the boss is here, so I'm not saying anything. But very quickly, you get rid of that and you get to the real issues that are going on. If someone has something forced upon them, we will always shove back against it. Whereas if someone says, what's your views? How can we do this better? I mean, as a carer, one of the wonderful things we had was that my husband's heart was only at 15 to 22%. They couldn't fix his heart because they had to do the thyroid cancer first. For those not medically trained, as I'm not, but learnt so much, if you have a general anaesthetic and you've got less than 30% of your heart working, there's a good chance that your heart will stop. So they didn't want to do anything that couldn't do with his heart. But that meant we sat at home for many months with him petrified to move. The little piece of kit this long that went on his foot told us an ECG once a day, so we could see for ourselves if it was getting better, if it was getting worse. And we was under 5 hospitals in 3 counties. And tech, I would love someone to tell me how I can know what my mate Manuel in Mexico had for breakfast and how much his dog nicks a melon. But no one in Essex could access a COVID and MRSA test in Harefield Hospital or Suffolk. Now that's bonkers. Oh, I've seen so many hours of critical care time given up looking for documents and paperwork. These medically trained people should not have to be doing that. And if we had more open conversations that allows everybody to come forward and say, are you aware that this is happening? I mean, luckily I'm a very calm person, but I can understand, you know, if you're facing open heart surgery and you get told, I'm very sorry, can't find the COVID test, we're probably not going to operate tomorrow morning, I can understand a lot of people wouldn't be calm. And that adds more stress to staff that they don't have to be dealing with. So bringing technology to real people could be so powerful on so many levels. And ultimately also then brings down the amount of time they're physically having to deal with things. We increase productivity as well as making people healthier and happier at work.
It seems that stress on staff is potentially one of the key issues that we're facing right now. I wonder, Claire, whether can you talk about the stress and the mental health impact that people who are coming to Frontline 19 are talking to you about?
I think it's on many levels, really. And I think the NHS has quite a hierarchy within it. And I think therein lies the problem, is that you have certain layers of workers that kind of have to do the shop floor work. And then you've got people higher up that kind of create some of the procedures that kind of are quite difficult to actually carry out. So I think there's a kind of a discord between the kind of different parts of the NHS. Generally speaking, the people that come to us at the moment are struggling with post-traumatic stress, burnout, which is emotional, physical exhaustion, anxiety, depression. Some have been bereaved, suffering with grief. Some of it can be quite complicated. There'll be multiple layers to it. A lot of traumatic experiences for staff where they have seen horrendous things on COVID wards. They've been moved from, I never forget, at the start of the pandemic, we had somebody that was a researcher in the NHS who'd been moved from that, which is quite a separate job, into a COVID ward in intensive care, and was given a list of people to ring. And when they said, what is this? And they said, well, that's a list of all the people that have died overnight. You've got to phone their families. And so somebody who has no idea how to manage that, and where your stress levels have an impact on not only how you think about things, but also how you behave. So your behavior is affected by it, and obviously physically it has an effect. We know that. What happens is the gap between what you know, how you know to do something, and then the point of what you've got to do. If there's a big gap between that, that causes a huge amount of stress. So I think there needs to be cultural changes within the NHS to put some of, emotional literacy, so people know how they're feeling, can communicate more effectively. There are lots of communication issues which I think would alleviate a lot of the difficulties within the system itself. So I think there's quite a few different layers to it, really, about what can be adapted and changed. But overall, right now, people feel very demoralised and they don't feel valued. I had a Zoom call with the Prime Minister last year, and we were discussing about, the staff and what's that. And I said to him, look, people are coming in to work to save people's lives, like they did with him, and he acknowledged that. And you're expecting them to pay to park. And that's just a little something within a big pile of things that makes life incredibly difficult. So I think there are many good pieces of technology that can help alleviate a lot of the legwork within this process, but it's also about freeing up time to connect with people, so patients, colleagues, and to help with that communication.
I absolutely reiterate everything you've just said, Claire. Again, from both sides of it, I can remember when my husband had his first thyroid cancer surgery, I sat in the car for like 17 hours waiting to hear if he was alive or not. They couldn't find him. So you can imagine, this is just a side surgery we're doing before we do open heart surgery. They couldn't find him. So I obviously was getting quite tearful. I have lupus, and if I get cold, it gets quite difficult to physically move. And here I am sat in a car, and I think it was like 3 degrees for 17 hours. Eventually they found him and let me in. And I got to see him, which was a massive level of relief. I was there for 2 minutes. So I've been shielded for 2 years with him. Second time, I expect I'm going to be allowed to see him for 2 minutes and just give him a kiss and say, well done, mate, you survived it again. Only to be told you can't see him. And I was consoling the nurse who was sobbing. She had to take her glasses off and she couldn't see. And she said, they won't let me let you in. And I can't see why you can't come in because you came in last time. And I felt more upset for her than I did for me and my husband. The thing is that for any change, for any ability to be resilient, you've got to physically make the time to make it happen. And I find it very frustrating that in other public sectors and in other teams where I've been able to massively support those people to deal effectively with the pandemic. I mean, one company I worked with, they said that it was in no small part down to our coaching. This is 3 hours every 2 months, that they reduced absenteeism to 0 in the first 8 months of the pandemic. And that's 3 hours every 2 months, right? On average, with the NHS teams, I would always double what they asked for. So they would ask for an hour and I'd give them 2. And that was it. They were given a 1 hour thing that's going to fix it. And it's not. The thing is, this is the kind of change that Claire will be able to reiterate is true. That once somebody knows how to be resilient and strong and understand how to communicate powerfully, they can do that for the rest of their lives. This isn't something we've got to go back and do again and again. We've got to constantly monitor their emotional intelligence. But once we've done that, we can make that person capable of anything. So many of the teams that I work with long term say, in the pandemic, like Harold said, we suddenly were online every day. And so many people will say to me that my team now come to me with solutions rather than I don't know what to do about this. And we're not enabling people. And that's very frustrating when there's so much technology out there that can enable people, because it's about I think I've always felt that it's about the staff and the teams. It's about the media, which I think have a very negative impact on our public sector. They make them feel inadequate. They make them feel like they're underpaid, and it's the only thing is going to work is money. And this is a mindset that we have to change with the public as well. It's all of us have to come together. And I think the tech would be appreciated and used so much more if we could enable the teams to just have that space to actually sit down and have these honest conversations. Amount of managers middle management say we have a meeting once a week. That's fine. And then I sit with these people and it all comes out and the manager says, I had no idea. Because you have a meeting. There's no agenda. They don't know what they're allowed to talk about.
Cool.
It's interesting.
Sorry, Harvey, can I just ask a question here? And Carol, is it for you and your team working in the community? Is that less stressful than being in the hospital? Because I have heard some things along those lines. You know that.
Do you know, it all goes back to what Mandie and Claire have said. It's actually the support that individual teams get. I have to say, and this is from a personal point of view, I'm not talking on behalf of the organisation, but we have been supported as an organisation. You know, we have coaching in place. We have a very active sales team that we can make referrals to. But it's not a magic wand. And it's, you know, the ongoing effects of the pandemic, they do take their toll. Everybody rallied around in the first instance, didn't they? You know, and people are tired. And on top of that now, we're introducing all this transformation, all this change, which has got to be in place. But, you know, we've got to be very mindful of whatever we put in place. It goes hand in hand with that building staff resilience as well. It's that's got to be a very important component of whatever we do. We're firm believers, I am here, of involving all staff. The ownership has got to be with the teams. And do you know, anybody could sit here from the NHS and most probably say exactly what I'm saying now, and then you think, oh, why isn't it happening? So it is all down to local management as well, and the organisations enabling that process to be in place. But yeah, so it is challenging because of all those factors. You know, transformation has got to be in place, and we've talked about that in the NHS for a long time. But yeah, that the supporting of the staff, building that resilience. You know, we have coaching, we have supervision, we have clinical supervision, we have mentoring, and you know, we've got to make time for that. And sometimes that's the bit that isn't given time. Because, you know, we've got patients walking in through the door. So it is striking that balance, and it's very easy to say, but it is getting that balance, and it's recognising it and reviewing it constantly, you know.
So I suppose the natural follow-up question to that is, how do we make the time, or how do we free up the time to allow those conversations to be had and to empower the people individually and the teams? And
it's not having unrealistic expectations on ourselves then, you know. It is all part of the plan. And we always say for every episode of care isn't complete until you've completed your documentation. Well, actually, we need to build in every episode of care isn't complete until actually, you know, some sort of supervision has also taken place. So, you know, I can't remember what it was Mandie or Claire said, it's about the culture. And you know, and how we really support people, you know, to make that change and not put unrealistic expectations on output. We're also very much of the ilk of involving children, young people and families in all of this as well. You know, they're the people that we're here for. They're the people that we have to, you know, improve their lives, not just their health, but it's that holistic overview. So, you know, we are actively involving our children, young people. They're wonderfully vocal. They tell us when they don't like things. You know, even in recruitment of staff, but, you know, when we're reviewing policies and not got it 100% right yet, but that's where we're going. So, and again, with because I know, you know, we're talking about changes, and so the pilot that we're undertaking at the moment about remote monitoring, it's not about doing to them. We do have sort of a consent and evaluation. So, and actually one family, when we approached them, declined because they didn't want any more, as they saw it, technology. They were home and they wanted to be home without it, and that's perfectly fine. So, but we've had others that have welcomed it, and it actually has given that reassurance factor to them as well. So it is, we can't just go out and say this is what we're doing. It is about working with our children, young people and families as well.
Is it all right if I just answer a couple of things that you, or come in and kind of say, when you talked about supervision, as a psychotherapist, I have to have clinical supervision in a ratio per month. And I think really that needs to be a recommendation, or I don't like using regulatory, but it has to be built into kind of the working day. And I think it's a bit of an add-on at the moment, whereas for me, I have to have it. It's a part of the ethical framework that we work towards. Obviously, it varies from membership body that you belong to. I think that is part of the story. And I know I years ago used to work in social care. Again, it was built into the working day, and you had to have a certain amount of clinical supervision. And clinical supervision, for people that don't understand, is that space between management supervision and for you as the practitioner or the professional to have that space to also process and to look at your impact in whatever work you've done, emotionally, academically, whatever comes out. It's that whole space in between. And I think that really helps people to process what they've seen and the way they've done things, and also the culture about encouraging and developing people. I mean, the level of support that your trust is offering is actually quite unusual. It's great. It's really nice to hear it. There are lots of trusts out there that either don't have any kind of support for the staff, or if they do, in some instances, there's a 3 to 5 year waiting list for counselling or trauma counselling. We're repeatedly getting contacted by IAPT practitioners who have staff members coming through the system who desperately need support, who are actively suicidal, and the support isn't there for them. So I think, again, it's a two-pronged kind of approach to this. It's one is about sorting out the here and now and having a very active, hands-on approach about supporting people now to recover. And I think there's also that part about looking forward, about changing the culture of things and having those conversations and planning this stuff in to the working day. And ultimately, I see it as a win-win, because people like Mandie, who kind of, were kind of in the situation with her husband, people will be able to communicate difficult news much more effectively. I had a conversation with a doctor, and we spoke about, he had to tell a family about a young child that had passed away. And I said to him, what sort of training did you ever do around this? He said, I've never had any training on how to break news like that. And yet death is hopefully not as common as perhaps people might appreciate, but death is a regular thing within the healthcare community, and yet for many people that's never talked about or acknowledged or processed in any way. So I think there's lots of learning to come from this. And finally, to touch upon the use of technology within patient treatment, I have to say I had a really positive experience recently. I had COVID, and I've got a few health issues that make it a little bit more complicated. And my doctors every day sent me a WhatsApp questionnaire. I filled it in. They sent me exercises to help with my lungs. The doctor came in and checked in on me, and it was really nice. It must have been easier for them to do, and for me, I felt like they were hovering in the background, just keeping an eye and making sure it was okay. And that went on for 2 weeks. Even at the weekend there was a check-in done, and it was reassuring. And again, it is that balance between, is this what I want, or do I want that human connection? But I think we can get a really nice balance between the two. One, I think it does save a lot of time for the practitioner and hopefully make things much more effective. And two, the patient feels really supported, and it can work in a really positive way. So I think there are lots of possibilities for technology going forward that can actually help everybody involved in this whole cycle of healthcare. I think it could be quite exciting.
Have you heard about the we call it the PIFU, patient initiated follow-ups? So this is patient-initiated follow-ups. So this is a national initiative, and you know, we're embedding it here as well. But as I say, it is a national initiative. But you know, we need to use technology with that as well. So instead of, you know, being seen by somebody in outpatients by the consultant and then say, okay, let's see you again in 3 months or 6 months, whatever it is, it's actually, you know, going through the whole scope of, you know, the healthcare at that time, and then saying, these are our contact details. You let us know when you need to be seen again. And I think people automatically assumed, oh, everybody would want to be seen straight away again. But actually, it's proven not to be the case where they've trialed it. But again, it's that use of technology, Claire, that you've just talked about. It's the keeping in touch. It's not just... Some people will always want the face-to-face. And again, it's that culture change, not just for us staff, but, you know, the population as a whole, isn't it? But if people start trusting technology and actually, well, do you know, I can just ask this question here, I can get a response, and then, yeah, that satisfies me, I can carry on. I don't need to sit in a waiting room for X, you know, amount of time if somebody's running behind or, you know, waiting for an appointment. So, yeah, it's that hopefully will be a really good initiative.
I think it could be quite interesting with generations as well, because I know that my parents would want to see somebody. They'll do a little bit of technology, but they want to see people. But younger people very often really prefer WhatsApp or text messaging or some other kind of contact. But when you think about it, there is some positive things that hopefully will come out of this whole period of time. And I think one of those, as you said earlier on, is about our attitudes towards technology, about how we can make things quicker. Because when you think about it, go to my doctor, I say I've got a problem with my big toe, and they go, okay, we'll do your referral. The hospital sends out an appointment. Oh, I'm on holiday. Okay, then I've got to phone in, speak to someone, rearrange it. Whereas if it's done all online and you go in and can then book your appointment yourself, it cuts out a lot of that administration time. And again, with, you know, when people want to see the doctor, I know they're trialing people booking their own appointments online and things like that. All of these things, I think we can take a lot of work out of, you know, from the practitioners. You know, let the patients have some space within that to kind of, you know, be autonomous and make choices. And that way it leaves that extra time for the other bits and pieces. But it's a multifaceted thing, really, isn't it?
Well, it is. And if you think we like to have ownership in every other aspect of our lives, and then we expect people to, well, yeah, we'll give you an appointment, and you will wait this length of time. So it is. Funny enough, just talking about children and young people, though, we did a survey, it was a couple of years ago, and it was how they wanted to keep in touch, or how, and they didn't want us to use the technology at the time, because that was for their friends. They would search, so we could put information on there, but when they wanted to see a school nurse, they wanted to see a real school nurse. Yeah, which was great for our service, but there we were thinking that we were getting, you know, hip and trendy and doing everything that they wanted, but no.
I think it's like the 20-year-olds now, isn't it, that do the WhatsApp thing. And I think it's a generational thing, but again, it's all about culture of the individual and what people kind of respond to, and
not making the assumptions. I mean, that's the massive thing that's gone on throughout, that goes through needing people to change, needing people to be resilient, is we make assumptions. They're all right, they've not said anything. But that doesn't mean to say they're all right. It means to say they're probably struggling privately. The amount of people, I have seen 2 people last year within large teams who had coaching programs underway, and the management team were very keen to stress this. And I was there for just 2 hours. And I saw 2 people afterwards that I contacted privately, and I said, I believe I'm not PTSD trained, I'm not a counsellor, I'm a coach. But I'm well aware of many of the techniques used. And I said, I do believe you're suffering from PTSD and you need some specialist treatment. And they said, oh, I've had some help. And I said, well, I don't think you're getting any help, because you actually sound in a very dangerous place. You need to go and talk to someone. And both of them come back to me and said, I just assumed it was all being dealt with because I was having a talking therapy. And, you know, we have to, I think that's the massive point, is that we make the assumption that this would involve massive amounts of time. I mean, in the companies that I helped the biggest levels of change, often we were doing tiny little ideas like banning emails being sent after 3 p.m. on a Friday. Just one thing. And I mean, the amount of times I sit with organisations, the middle management saying, we have to do this, that has to be done, this has to be done, I have to work till 10 o'clock at night, you don't understand, this is just the job. The amount of money I could make out of people that said it is what it is, and it has never been it is what it is. It's that acceptance that I've got to put up with it being this awful. But once we stop and say, I'm not going to put up with it being this bad, I'm going to put my hand up and say, we need to do something. It doesn't have to be massive levels of change to create big differences. You know, giving people the opportunity to take tech home and be more responsible and autonomous over their own healthcare, it does the patient good, it does the organisation good, and it does the staff good. You know, but we have to break down this idea that we've got to give nurses 6 months off to be able to understand how to do this. You don't. You need to make a little bit of a change. But I think the other aspect of that on the other side is for those that make the decisions, is whether we like it or not, we have to show what the benefits are. And the benefits are that you will lose less staff. I think it costs about £11,000 per time you have to replace a member of staff. It will cost you less money losing staff. It will cost you less money in sick days. It will cost you less money in counselling. You know, if we can make those that make the decisions aware of the benefits of what we are talking about, they'll do it. But until they see that it's beneficial, I think we're always going to have us at the bottom, me and Claire and Carol, going, come on, we've got to do more. You know, whereas if we could get those from the top to come down and say, look, let us reduce your absenteeism. Let us reduce your stress. Let us make the teams happier and more productive. And if they can see it from that point of view, they will get on board that it doesn't need to be massive to make big changes. And that's when tech will be really, really grasped and appreciated, because people will be on it.
The problem is there's a huge stigma within the NHS, a culture of we don't talk about it, a wall of silence. And the difficulty is, and we hear it time and time again, and one of the most common questions we get asked when people want support from us is, will you tell my manager that I'm in touch with you? And so there is a huge cultural issue within the NHS and helping professions about seeking support. People are worried that, you know, doctors are worried that they won't be promoted or they won't be able to go for this specialism because people know that they're on anti-anxiety medication. You know, people don't want to tell anybody that they're having any kind of counselling. And then I think the people that make the decisions are aware of this, but it's about how much of a priority is it? And obviously, I don't know every section of the NHS and what those challenges are, but it's taken the pandemic to really force the issue onto the agenda, because it's not actually that new. Yes, the amounts of people that are struggling right now has drastically increased, but there has always been a culture of silence, and there has always been people that have struggled with their mental health and a lack of support within the NHS and associated services.
You're bang on, Claire, because that's one of the first things I say in sessions. This is completely confidential. You cannot repeat what we talk about in this room to anybody, and you are safe to say anything. You have to create non-judgmental, guilt-free environments, because it's without those you won't see massive levels of change. I'm actually suffering from PTSD right now and complex trauma as a result of, well, you know, no great shocker that I am. I watched my husband have a stroke in a video call, and he suddenly was saying, I can't words. And that's all he could say. And he was laying in a hospital bed. He couldn't get anyone's attention. I'm watching him have a stroke. His face is dropping. His eyes have gone black, and that's all he can say. I couldn't get through to the ward. They were busy. It was the whatever lockdown. We was in November 2020. I hadn't spoken to a single member of staff. They'd always promised to call me back. They never did. And there he was having a stroke. When I finally got through, I got told, oh, your husband's having a nap. Now, I've been with my husband for 30 years and he's never had a daytime nap in his entire life. And I said, I think you'll find he's having a stroke. And it wasn't until that night I found out the stroke team had been out and he had a TIA. But I have no issue with speaking up and saying I'm suffering from PTSD, because that was a horrifically traumatic experience, only for us to have many more. In the middle of trying to get him around the M25 for his open heart surgery, I also had to try and find fuel because everyone was panic buying fuel. And then someone had decided to glue themselves to the M25. These are extreme situations we found ourselves in. They were bizarre. But I have immense levels of emotional intelligence and resilience, and understanding of what I think and feel impacts on the actions and results I've got. So I spoke to specialists last year and said, do I get some treatment now or do I wait till it's all over? And they said, wait until it's all over. But I think that's important, is I will speak up, and we need more people to speak up and say, look, I've got PTSD. It doesn't stop me doing a day's work. It just means I have to be mindful of my needs. And I know I can recover far faster than most, because I do have all of these skills that I've been teaching others for years. We have to make it safe for people to speak. And I find it abhorrent, really, that in our public sectors, we see so many suffer and die from what is basically avoidable because we won't talk about mental health. That beggars belief.
That is, do you know, it's, and I can only talk from my experiences in the organisations I've worked in, but, you know, locally here, we do have a big emphasis on staff resilience. And I have seen a cultural shift. People are, as you say, Mandie, you've just done that, putting their hand up and say, do you know, I've accessed this service. I've accessed counselling. We have, during the pandemic, we actually had a rota. So myself and other leaders would go and do a shift by the ITU so that the nurses and support staff could come out and actually offload, you know, if for want of you know, better expression. And the feedback we had was that was really helpful. So we're trying to continue it now because, you know, the challenges are different. We don't have the COVID patients, but they're there in a different way.
That's a very important point. I think one of the many strengths of people that work in the NHS is also part of a weakness, because they are naturally very nurturing people. They go into this vocation because they genuinely want to make a difference. They genuinely care. I've got a strategy I use called the importance list, where I ask people to tell me where they place themselves on the importance list. Are they 10 at the top or are they 1 at the bottom? And when I'm working with people in care industries and the NHS, I quite often hear, well, of course I'm a 3. I'm only a 3. And we have to adjust that. So we enable people to say, no, you're just as important as the person you're looking after. You can't do that job unless you've looked after yourself physically, emotionally and mentally. So these kind of conversations are absolutely critical. And for some people, having something so simple in some form of tech that says to them, today I'm a 3, but yesterday I was a 7. Well, what's changed between the 2 days? How can I monitor this? Simple little tech ideas that enable people to take the control themselves. And if they're not feeling confident to put their hand up, they've still got a way of monitoring what's going on using simple tech, and then hopefully having some format to come forward and speak.
I think perhaps we could go a bit deeper into that topic, Mandie. So in terms of staff resilience, what is the type of tech that you think staff in the NHS need or are in need of?
I think the first thing would be enabling people to see the issues. So you can, and this would help the organisation to make changes as well, because it's not just, you're not just going to see someone looking tired or being a bit snappy. You could see someone that sends far too many emails and needs to get someone to sign off on everything because they're so worried they're making a mistake because their brain isn't working correctly. I do a talk where we talk about, there was 2 Israeli judges who will both remove their 10-minute breaks. And it meant that within a week, they didn't let a single person go or be released. Not one person made it to release because they felt their ability to make a good decision went out the window. So if we could enable people to have something simple that enables them to see, how do I feel today? Do I feel better on a Monday or a Friday? You know, simple things that make simple 1 to 10 scales. I've got a negative spiral thing where we look at, it's from cognitive behavioral therapy, where we look at feelings, emotions, actions, results. And if you can really understand how you as an individual work and how others work, which could be completely different to you, if that could be in a simple app, you can start to acknowledge it and go, hang on a sec, I'm going down this spiral here. I need to stop this. You know, I teach people to have a mental health toolkit. You know, what's in that toolkit? Lets me remind myself, you know, what have I put in my app that would make me feel instantly in a better place? It doesn't have to be big things. I once joked with the team last year. I said, what would make it better? They went, if they put puppies and cake in these meetings, I'm sure I'd cope better with them. But all joking aside, what they wanted, when I said to them, well, what does that actually mean to you? What would it give you? What they were saying is, well, give me a chance to just talk to somebody. And imagine an app where you could just have all this information to hand, and then you have like your little team, and you can press that button and go, today I need to talk to somebody, and I know there's 10 people in this app that will be there for me, and you all agree. Because there's lots of evidence that when you do imaging on the brain, when we help other people, it actually helps ourselves. It releases certain endorphins and chemicals in the brain. Imagine a little app that you know that there's 10 people, 10 days a week, that you can tap on there and go, no, today is not a good day. Someone talk to me. You know, because I think the other thing we have to be mindful of is we are in a very volatile world right now, and not many people appreciate how much social media and the media massively impacts on them. We've got to learn how to control what we allow into our brains. So apps that enable us to be more mindful of what we're allowing to come into our heads in the first place would help us in all areas of our lives. I mean, this could have, as Claire has said, there are some seriously massively good opportunities here, as long as we have these conversations and then do something about them.
And I just said we do have therapy dogs, and they're wonderful.
Do you have cake? Yeah. Do you have the cake?
Oh, yeah. No, everybody's always on a diet. But, do you know, just thinking about it, one of the tools that we're starting to use is something called the Ground Truth tool. Again, this has been devised with partners from, I think it was Liverpool University. But and again, it's an app, and you put in, it asks you questions, and you know, it will give you feedback. What we're doing, it's not an app where other people are online at the moment, but the information is collated, and it's acted more like a reflective tool to make you think about, actually, how am I feeling today? And then we can collate confidentially. If we use it, we can use it on an individual basis, and they take that to a supervisor, or we can have a team supervision collate the themes, and again, you know, talk it through. So there are stuff out there that we just need to embrace.
I think that's the key point. It can't come from just us. It's got to come from every single person in that department.
Yeah.
Every single person. If every single person has their say, I've often heard a cleaner say, well, what have I got to offer? Well, you're working here, you see what goes on, you know, and they often have the most insightful ideas, you know, and you say to them, what would that mean? But what would that mean? And what would that mean? And then you take that information and give it to a company like yours and say, right, this is what everyone's told us. How do you make this a thing? And that's the thing, because people wouldn't necessarily know what the tech they need is, but they would know what they would like to feel or not be feeling, or, you know, what impact they would like to not have on their lives.
It's all, and I mean, again, there's lots of work going on at the moment about this parity of esteem. So it's not just about your physical health. So for our children and young people, especially, you know, coming out, can we say we're coming out of the pandemic now? But, you know, it's had such dramatic effects on them, you know, mental health and how they work. So, yeah, it's actually not just coming in for a surgical. It's, you know, let's assess, let's give them the opportunity to talk about how they're feeling and, you know, and everything else. So, and it's for staff as well, the parity of esteem for staff. So for, you know, within the NHS, for everybody, it's not just the NHS staff, is it?
But it is everybody, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Because
we work more and more with our, we work in an integrated way. So we're working more with our partners in the local authority. Everything we have one vision for Liverpool, and that's what we're working on. So it's like one touch point. Yeah, so loads of development going on. But again, that's tiring, isn't it? We always come back to it's been tiring. We need holidays. That's what we need. That's very flippant. Sorry.
And I think a key part to all of that is about creating the safety. Because if you think about when we garden, you put down fertilizer, you dig the right hole, you water it, you give, you know, the saplings what they need. I think part of the issue that I'm constantly hearing is that the ideas are good for some of the projects, and obviously it's not specifically about the projects that you're doing, but that they're kind of like, right, you'll do this, and actually there's no explanation really around how that feels to be part of that. And also the safety aspect has to be discussed. It has to be this very kind of connected, thought up approach, so that people kind of can make the decision. Because ultimately people often say they prefer an external person to talk to, because that's why counsellors, you know, in private practice are really busy, because people want that person outside of their normal day-to-day work to kind of talk it through and to do it in a way that's safe. So it is on many levels, and unfortunately the helping professions need to look at the culture when people talk about mental health, because it's probably one of the most stigmatized areas I've come across. And I've worked in the NHS myself, I've worked in local authority. It really is quite breathtaking, some of the comments that people make, and it be taken as it being okay. You know, and people that have had breakdowns and the, you know, their managers have said to them, yeah, but it's mental health, so you can still come in and lift some stuff and do X, Y, and Z. It's about psychoeducational work, about letting people know how this is affecting people, how they can manage it. And again, the whole organisation, whichever it may be, has to be on board with that, and it has to cascade down from the top to the bottom. Because there are amazing people working within the NHS and helping professions, but at the moment they're losing 400 people a week, and this is going to get worse. And so what people are doing is creating their own safety by leaving. They're going out into different roles, some within the community, within the NHS, and others completely out of the NHS. You know, we've had people leaving the NHS as nurses and going working in fast food restaurants because it's less stressful. And they're completely burnt out. And that is a travesty, not only for that person that is amazing and has given, you know, their experience and time to the NHS, but also if you look at it from a very business point of view, the costings around that, you know, of that amount of experience and training, plus getting somebody else in and train them, it's huge. And it needs transformation. But you know, this whole thing about the NHS needs knocking down, it doesn't. You know, you wouldn't do that with anything else. What it does need is some TLC, some decent funding, and some slightly different structure. It's an amazing organisation, but
best
it needs
thing this country has, Claire.
Absolutely, I totally agree with you. But what it needs is modernising, which there are bits coming out now, and that's where the tech does come into play. But I do think it should be supported and nourished, because it's been underfunded for years, and what it does need is restructuring so that the people within it can do the amazing work that they do. And there is no two ways about it. There are some amazing people working within the NHS and associated frontline
yes, a lot of them saved my husband's life last year.
my dad wouldn't be here without them, absolutely not. And unfortunately I lost a friend of mine on Christmas Day this year through the same condition that my dad had, because of, you know, the levels of staffing and stuff, and you know, not being in the same situation. So it has a huge impact on patient recovery rates and the amount of input that's needed when you look at how the staff can think about things, and part of that is about autonomy.
And you raised a good point at the start there, Claire, related to what Carol was saying, is this isn't this isn't a standard. I mean, my husband's across 5 different hospitals in 3 counties, and I know that if I was waiting for a letter so my husband's medication could be changed, it was absolutely pointless for it to wait for it to arrive, because it could take 3 to 6 months. So I would then spend 2 or 3 days on the phone speaking to nurses, shouldn't be taking up their time, speaking to secretaries just to get a copy of a letter that could have been emailed the same day. I don't understand how it can be so complicated. But the standard isn't the same, and that's not good enough. If you live in one area, I mean, I was literally told in a 3-minute call, we don't have time to talk to you, your husband has to update you. So he's just had a stroke. He doesn't even know what day of the week is. He doesn't even know he's had a cup of tea. And you're telling me he's going to tell me what medication he's on and what tests you've done and what you found wrong with him. And she turned around and said, well, I'm very sorry, Mrs. Holgate. Your husband's not a candidate for surgery. The situation is rather hopeless and we don't know what to do. And my husband's listening to this as she's got his phone in her hand. And then she said, but I have to go because I'm very busy and I've got people to look after. You know, if it hadn't been for my tenacity and my never giving up, he would have died in that hospital within a week. That's it. And it has to be a standard across all hospitals. We need Carol in the newspaper shouting about her brilliance.
Oh, I'm sure my bosses might have something to say about that.
But this is the thing, unless we have transparency within the NHS, we will still see these hospitals that are failing, and we will still see these amazing hospitals doing great things, but they're not actually enabled to be able to be, I don't know, the shining example of excellence. We've got to be transparent, because otherwise people die.
The problem is a lot of this stuff is known about. It is known about. I had a meeting with the health secretary last year and with a lot of the top layer of the NHS. They're well aware of what's going on with the staff. They're well aware of what's needed. The point that's always the sticking point is who will pay for it. And that's the difficulty. And without getting too political, it's not high on their agenda. There seems to be an attitude that people are replaceable. And I think that this is going to come to fruition in the next couple of years, because although we hope the pandemic is coming to an end, there is then the aspect of all of the surgeries and everything else, the treatments that are needed that have stacked up whilst COVID has been incredibly active. So the pressures on the NHS don't go away. They change, and kind of maybe the challenges are different. But I think ultimately it has to be looking at restructuring and kind of developing some of these technologies to fit in, to alleviate some of this stuff, to free up more time. Like with the GPs, you know, they're always getting bashed in the papers. You know, I can only speak from my experience. My GP is being amazing, does video calls, WhatsApp stuff, all sorts of different things, and uses the technology that's much quicker. And I think that it's about overall having a view of how you can make this work. But I sometimes struggle, because I wonder at what point does, you know, the people that are in charge of these sorts of things know what's going on. They probably know what's needed, or some of them definitely know what's needed, and yet it still doesn't happen. And when does incompetence of managing the whole situation become a different agenda to perhaps, and I don't know, to perhaps privatise certain aspects of the helping professions? So it's complicated. I think that on a simplistic level, culture needs to change, more training, the way that things operate does need to change. But overall, there has to be a view of, we're actually going to sort this out, either do it or don't, because ultimately you've got this, you know, where some bits are really pushing forward and doing incredibly well, and then other bits are kind of failing and questioning perhaps why that is so. And it's a difficult one.
And I think that you've basically said what somebody said to me last week: I'm not going to sit around and wait for a political party to fix this. We're going to do this internally. And so I think that we are going to need case studies of, we've got these things in place and they are working for us. And then enabling, that clearly is an obstacle for enabling tech to arrive, is who's going to pay for this? But if you can showcase the benefits, did you say 400 people a week? So if you look at that as an £11,000 per person rehire cost, the training, I mean, as a trust, you must look at that and go, hang on a sec, this piece of kit costs this much, we've lost this many people, this one's the better option. So I think we do have to do what the client said to me last week. I'm not going to sit and wait for a political party to decide it's on the agenda. We're going to do this internally. So I think that, Carol, we're all very much in awe for the work you're doing.
Do you know, I'm just thinking perhaps there's a disconnect, because I don't, Alder, hey, this organisation, I mean, I really enjoy working for this organisation because there is a lot of innovation and there's a drive there. But this is it, when you talk nationally though, this innovation is going on all over the place. So I think perhaps there is a disconnect about the innovation and the transformation getting to the people on the front line. So, and those are the people that you're seeing, and, with and they've got this reduced resilience. I'm sitting in this now and I'm just looking at the wall. I'll show you at the end. And it actually is a big poster up there saying, working together with respect and using innovation to provide an open, transparent and excellent service. And that says it all, really, doesn't it? And that's the ethos. It's not just this organisation, I'm sure, but a lot of organisations have. So it's how we get around that disconnect, because there's a lot of transformation that's happening, but people have got to buy into it. They've got to be informed, haven't they, and be part of it. So perhaps that's where some organisations are better than others.
I think perhaps between the three of you just there, you've wrapped up this issue and summarised what we've talked about quite well today, and we have just about run out of time. I want to finish off with maybe just noting the key themes that seem to have appeared in our discussion today. And it seems to me a lot of it revolves around, rather than prescribing some sort of top-down solution, it's about empowering the individuals and about empowering the teams to be able to innovate and be able to cut through the paperwork and the bureaucracy that they see and the unique challenges that they have, which I think, as a technologist myself, and I know Keith will see it this way as well, there's certainly technological ways that we can do that we can empower people, but it's not all about the technology. Of course, it's about the emotional support and making the time in the day for people to be able to build their resilience and have coaching and learn how to deal with these things better. So yeah, I mean, if anyone has any final points they'd like to add, Keith, perhaps.
Well, I think this has been really, really interesting listening, and it's a lot of it is about one of the really important aspects of healthcare, which is it's always delivered locally. It has to be done locally. But the NHS is this funny organisation, which is a mixture of kind of lots and lots of really good things happening locally, and an overall hierarchical structure which says you can do this or you can't do that. And certainly we know that there's certain things about the way procurement is done in the NHS, which is a disaster. There's prescriptions that come down about how things are to be done with technologies. I mean, in principle, nobody should be using WhatsApp, for instance, but it's just such a handy tool. And so there is that disconnect, but I believe that that's readily, not simply, but it could be readily changed through a political will to do so. And I think, sorry, Claire, you made the point that there needs to be that political will to change it in some way, and that has to come from everybody, as you've been saying. But and some of those things are simply decisions about, for instance, how procurement is done in the NHS, how people who make those decisions are rewarded or incentivized, These are simple business process re-engineering things that could be done, but it has to be seen as being a priority and something that's worth doing. And it can't just be handed over to PwC or, EY or something to come in and say, do it this way, and then they all, disappear again. So I think there's something here that really can be addressed, but I think it does need all of us as users of the NHS and as voters in the country to make that very, very clear as a message. It's not about politics. In fact, it has to be decoupled from politics. We've seen far too much politicization of the NHS and used as a political football from one party to the other. I mean, what a disaster. And we also know on the management thing that, in the early days of COVID, things seemed to be really well organized because, from what I heard, the managers were kicked out and made to stay at home, and the clinical teams got on and reorganized the hospitals in a way which was going to be effective to treat the people who were coming through, and all the Nightingale hospitals and so on were not necessary because of that. So, I think, it's been really, really interesting. And I think that we need to, those of us involved in any way should be trying to put that pressure onto the decision makers to really get on and make some choices, basically, to make things better. Yes, and it's not technology. It's about, the will of the people, if you like to put it in those terms, to try to change the whole thing. Okay.
Well, once again, thank you all very much for taking the time to come join us for our first Isansys webinar. I feel like I've definitely learned a lot. I'm not nearly so embedded in this sector, in this topic as all of you are. So again, thank you. Thank you so much for this.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much. Take care, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Really good to
everyone.
meet you. Thank you.
Angie, bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.